Now over to J.O.
Well, being one of the rookies on this flight, they wanted me to sort of describe what it was like to get up in the middle of the night and walk out with all kinds of photographers waiting for you and flashing lights to make you blind when you tried to stumble into the trailer, and then we were on our way. It was a short 4 or 5 mile trip, and it's an eerie feeling when you get into that vehicle and there's nobody else around. Main engine ignition lasts for about 6 seconds. You can feel the vibration in the vehicle. Fortunately, we couldn't see all the smoke and steam and fire coming out the back end. Gimbal the engines just before takeoff after they're lit, and when you lift off, you'll be able to see the shock waves in the main engines. T0, the hold-down bolts are blown, and the SRB's light, and we're on our way. I personally got a chance to see the tower glide by out my peripheral vision, and then the roll shortly after tower clear, and if you look closely there, you can see the diamond shock waves in the exhaust of the main engines. John Young said after he came back from Flight 1 and saw the movies of that, Eddie Shearer was glad he couldn't see all that flame and smoke, or he'd been a whole lot more concerned during liftoff. That's a bit of a rough ride during the first 2 minutes and 11 seconds of the flight, in which the solid rockets are burning. We're about to go supersonic. If you look closely, you can see the shock waves forming on both the SRB and the orbiter itself. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that the shock waves have engulfed the whole back of the orbiter itself. They go all the way from the cockpit all the way back to the tail. We were fortunate to have a very clear day. 2 minutes and 11 seconds, we had SRB set. From the cockpit point of view, there was a loud bang and a flash of light across the windscreen, and it left an opaque film on the windows, which made looking straight out the forward windows somewhat more difficult for the rest of the ascent, although I was spending most of my time watching the gauges inside. And after the main engine burnout at MECO, about 8 minutes and 30 seconds into the flight, we got our first real look at the world gliding by outside. Spectacular sight.
The first day on orbit, we deployed Morelos, Hughes telecommunications satellite for Mexico. This is the first telecommunications satellite which Mexico owns, and we'll be flying again with us late next year. The deployment of a PAM and telecommunications satellite is really a crew effort, and it takes an integrated teamwork by 5 folks in order to get one of these things off and to document it. Here you can see John Creighton in the right seat up there piloting the orbiter and pointing it, and I'm talking through the orbiter's general purpose computer to the satellite, which is back in the bay. Shannon Lucid is operating the standard switch panel, which controls the ordnance on the booster. Shannon's not real fond of this camera angle, as you can see. Meanwhile, Dan is overseeing the entire operation, and Steve Nagel is getting all the photo documentation. And there's Morelos coming out. It comes out rather smoothly. It's about 2 foot per second separation rate as it tracks right straight up the tail. And we've deployed it retrograde here and inertially, so that a half a rev later, it'll be pointed in the proper direction to go for geosynchronous. Really nice photography here with the zoom capability to pick this guy out. This is a deployment of ArabSat, deployed for a consortium of Arab nations which comprise the Arab League. And again, you can see there's a level of intensity here associated with doing one of these deployments. We recognize the importance of these things and their value. And here's ArabSat going out. It's built by Aerospatiale, a French corporation, and it looks, of course, considerably different than the other satellite which we had for Hughes.
ArabSat is, as a matter of fact, operating very well now in geosynchronous orbit, and that's when I started breathing again, is when it came out of the shuttle. So it's doing very well, I have to report that.
Again, here, as in many shots, you'll see the limb of the Earth in the background. And this is the third telecommunications satellite deployment. This is Telstar for AT&T. It's the 100th satellite put into space by the Hughes company, and we're pleased to have been a part of that. And again, you can see the look of concentration on folks' faces as we get down to the count. And here it goes out again, 6,000 pounds of force pushes it out of the cargo bay, and you can feel that. It's a real thump on the vehicle when that spring force goes off. I think our pointing accuracies were measured in hundredths of the required accuracy. So everything was, in fact, done very well from the orbiter point of view, as well as a nominal countdown. Having good equipment and good procedures and good training in advance makes these deployments routine in space.
Steve and I are doing some work on the IG experiment, and I think we've gotten enough material on that experiment to get a PhD for the research and a couple more for me and Steve. So
I think all the training and preparation for the camera work paid off because all of us were quite familiar with the cameras to be able to document the various aspects of this mission. This is just a 16mm pass across Madagascar. Our primary objective in photography was to get still 70mm of that, but we thought some movies would be nice. This will give you a good idea of the rate at which the ground's passing under you on the various passes. You can see if you want to do still photography, you better know what you want to shoot and get your camera set up and shoot it. And we're looking at deforestation and burn off in many of the areas of the world, Madagascar being one of those.
And that's me taking some more pictures also for one of my experiments. Made a deal with the geologists in Saudi Arabia. Any mineral findings, the crew gets half, but they said no, just a thank you note.
That's the first group of French experiments in the area of neurosensory physiology. And in fact, we take signals from certain muscles on the legs and muscles of the eyes, and to build a strategy of the equilibrium in weightlessness.
Professor Ron Roy-Chan crosses a swift-flowing tributary north of the river.
I was fixing dinner one day, and I asked Patrick, Patrick, you hungry? Well, would you like dinner anyway? Would you like coffee with your dinner, Patrick? How about some milk? Lemonade, maybe? How about some wine with dinner?
You can see not all the moments on the flight deck were as intense as a satellite deployment, and we took the opportunity to do some photography on board also. A lot of the time when we weren't deploying a satellite or the Spartan, we were looking out the window, or like Joe, just having a lemonade here.
Okay. As you see, not all retrievals on this flight were successful. So let John Fabian do this one.
In fact, we fighted very much to have our food, and even when our both of us fighting very much, we were not all the time very successful.
Experimenting here with some more retrievals. Those are the two satellites we didn't deploy.
The food service system on the shuttle works really nicely, and of course we eat a lot of rehydratable food, which is a byproduct of the backpacking industry in this country. The galley is nice to use. In fact, it works so well that we found out halfway through the flight that we'd forgotten to set 3 circuit breakers, so it works even better with everything on.
And once the food was prepared, a lot of times we'd like to go up on the flight deck and eat. It's really nice to sit there and eat and look out the window and just watch the world go by. As a matter of fact, J.O.'s hanging up there in the window trying to get one of the Earth observation passes. And I guess he was so intent on doing that, he hadn't even started to eat yet. But as you can see in this pan, as we pan around the cockpit, that there was not a tremendous amount of room to spare. It gets very crowded with everybody up there.
But we optimized the window space, I'll have to say that.
That's true.
Obviously, my table wasn't ready, so I had to wait a little bit.
But the food was really good, and I think mealtime was one of the high points of the day.
That's a posture experiment. And about the French experiment, I must tell you that, in fact, all the crew was participating because, as you see, it takes a bit of room in the mid-deck. And to help me, all the crew tried to not go into the mid-deck when I was working, and that was very great. And Shannon worked on the French echograph, you'll see later, and Sultan was working with me all the time on the posture experiment. And both experiments worked very well. And the French scientists, when we came back, were so happy that they could not sleep during 1 week. And we took back such a lot of good data that they could not believe. So they are very happy and thank very much all the crew, not only Sultan and Shannon and me.
That's what you get for letting a test pilot do medical experiments on you. So, I still don't think Patrick will make a good doctor. He'll never do that.
Well, J.O. and I were the deployment team for deploying Spartan. J.O. was flying the orbiter, and I was flying the arm. And here you see a shot of the arm coming down over the grapple fixture on the Spartan. It was in the bay. And then we grappled it, and then we released the Spartan, and we were sort of surprised it sort of rose up on the in the rim there. And then we used the arm, and we very carefully maneuvered Spartan out of the bay, and we're, of course, looking to make sure we don't run into anything. And then we take Spartan up and then point it in the correct attitude before we released it. Now the background there in the picture, Steve was taking the movies, and he had to stand back a ways. He couldn't get right up to the window, of course, because J.O. and I were using the windows, and that's just smudges and desiccant in the background that are causing the spots there on the black part of the picture. But the arm worked as advertised. It's really a very versatile piece of machinery. And here you can see we released the Spartan and very gently pulling the arm back so that we didn't induce any tip-off rates into the Spartan.
The moment of release, Shannon's work was done and mine just started. We trained for a variety of tip-off rates, but fortunately the Spartan was rock solid. And shortly after we released it, the Spartan went through a programmed rotation maneuver. First rotated one direction about 45 degrees and stopped, and then rotated back. And it had to go through these motions before we were certain that the Spartan was really going to work. And once it did, then we were given a go to separate from the Spartan. And we did. Had it not gone through these rotations, then Shannon would re-grappled it with the arm, and we would have put it back in the payload bay. And we separated it at approximately 1 foot per second out to about 800-900 feet, and then we did a second separation maneuver in a retrograde fashion to separate out to about 100 miles from the Spartan over a 2-day period, and then to return and get it on the rendezvous. And there you can see the Spartan was approximately 400 feet below us there as we were passing over Ecuador.
That's certainly the most beautiful time during the flight when you look at the window, the Earth and space.
I was amazed how far away you could see the Spartan. We tracked it with our eyes quite a ways out, and then on the rendezvous 2 days later when we were coming up on it, we first got a visual observation of the Spartan about 36 miles away.
Well, you have to live on the spacecraft too, and it seems like I'm either cooking or eating. J.O. spent a lot of time back there in the corner. He was the cleanest crew member on board, far and away. You know, I'd be finished by now if I were washing my face. Shannon would be finished by now if it were her. We had to cut this. You're only seeing about 10%.
That's when I did my famous 1,500 miles all in one shot. You get tired running 1,500 miles. Took about 5 minutes.
You see, all the equipment did not work very well. That was a major failure in the French experiments.
People often ask how you sleep and where you sleep, so we decided to document this. And you'll see see that Dan and J.O. chose to sleep on the flight deck in their seats with the black sleep goggles on. And the position of the arms is simply where they go when all the muscles relax. Also up on the flight deck was John. You can see from this picture he was pretty uptight during the whole mission. He just slept kind of free-floating behind the back seats on the flight deck. There were 4 others of us downstairs, and you'll see a camera pass through the mid-deck.
Never complain about hotel accommodations after this one.
Sultan liked it best up on the lockers. And Patrick moved around a little bit, but some nights he was on the wall with me, just above me. And if you counted heads, that leaves, that's up to 6 now, and you might wonder where the 7th person is. We never really saw the 7th person, but you can just see a part of the sleeping bag hanging out from inside the airlock there, and that's where I had to tap Shannon and wake her up each morning.
That the other group of friends experiment, the echograph, and that was the first time that such sophisticated equipment could be used such early after the launch. And really it worked perfectly, and less than 3 hours after the launch I could work and take the first data.
Still haven't figured out what I'm doing there, but it's one of my experiments, the phase separation experiment. And I have to report also, like Patrick did, all the data we came back with came out really great. They did make a photographer out of me, and I'm trying to forget everything I learned.
We participated in an experiment, a tracking experiment of the orbiter called the HPTE, or High Precision Tracking Experiment. And on the second attempt, as we pointed the side hatch window with a small reflector mounted in it at the island of Maui, Hawaii, we spotted a very low-powered laser which was blinking on and off. This is a view from one of the payload bay cameras, and the iris of the camera was responding to the different intensities of light. So to the naked eye, it didn't look quite as dramatic as it does in these photos, but it did demonstrate a capability of not only the ground to track the orbiter, but the orbiter to precisely point any portion of it at a point on the ground also.
Well, after a day and a half of letting Spartan fly on its own and get its data, it was time to turn around and come back. And here we're already closing in on it on the V-bar, which we're at about 200 feet, and he's zooming in a little bit here. But the whole rendezvous went very smoothly. We had a little bit of a eye-opener at one of our burns where we had 2 jets fail, but we had practiced those in simulations so often that we went right through that with no problem. We closed in on it. Here you can see the sun setting in the background. We still don't have the explanation as to why, but Spartan did not end up in the exact attitude we expected it, so we had to do a little real-time planning up there into how we anticipated grabbing a hold of it. And essentially what we did was fly a little bit forward in the payload bay and a little bit lower, and then John could, by moving the arm, could reach around behind it.
And here you see the view from the end of the robot arm, the TV camera sitting out on the end effector, as we call it, and the grapple target right there in front of you. Dan provided, as you can tell here, a very stable platform from which to operate the robot arm, and it's a very capable system. And this, I think, indicates that things don't have to be perfect in order to use this mechanism. And we were obviously overjoyed when we finally picked it up.
John let out a war whoop that about scared us all to death when he grabbed it.
And here you see it sitting on the arm. We kept it out there for a little bit until the sun came up so we could get some photographs of Spartan and document its condition prior to putting it into the bay. And at that time, it was time to sneak it down into the latches, and the arm did its job again here very well. It's quite a high precision device, and one which we are going to continue to use very successfully with the shuttle program. I think that the really unique things about the shuttle program are the capabilities not only to put things into space, but also to bring them back to Earth. The arm is an integral part of that, as well as the capability to repair satellites in space. You can see the capability to maneuver very accurately and precisely with the arm is important to us.
Well, unfortunately, like just about everything in life, all good things have to come to an end sometime. And after we deployed the satellites and got Spartan out and back, it was time to get ready to come back home. Here you see us on V-orbit morning. Actually, we were very organized and everything went really smooth. It might not look quite that way, but everything had a place and we had everything in the proper place. We have to put the seats back in, and then we had to put all the dirty clothes, those are in those mesh bags, and stow them away so they wouldn't hit anybody on as we came back in. And the other brown bags floating up there were the helmet bags, and we were putting them by the seats so that everybody would have their own helmets to put back on.
Re-entry is not quite as spectacular as launch, but when you are coming through the air at around Mach 20 to 22 and you start getting the rosy glow, it's really spectacular. John was also taking some pictures looking out the back, and maybe he can describe to you what he's seeing.
This is looking out the overhead window, and the tail of the vehicle is not in sight. What you're seeing here is simply the interaction of shock waves around the vehicle converging up over the top of the spacecraft and making that very intense picture. And then back to the glow on the windows, with very intense heat outside the glass.
Coming across to California, we're heading east into a rising sun, so once again we couldn't see anything due to the haze on the windows, but once we got partway around the hack, as you see here, I could make out the runway. We'd decided to go to runway 23 as a result of the predicted winds, and as we rolled out on final, the winds were a crosswind, so you can try and predict wind, but you aren't always going to hit it correctly. At that point, it was too late to change runways, and we continued on to the lake bed runway 23. The vehicle, as has been said before by previous commanders who have flown it, handles very well, and even in a crosswind, you probably have to work a little more at it, but it still is a very precise flying machine, and all the training we get in the shuttle training aircraft certainly helps, because you can see the gear come down here when you do your first landing. It's got to be a good one for real the first time. It's good to have all that training behind you, and you feel confident that everything is going to work out just fine, as it did in this case. We touched down and pretty lightly, bounced just a little bit, got the nose down, and we'd, by design, tried to do almost a max braking. They wanted 10 to 12 foot per second braking rate as we touched down. The lake bed was a little bit soft, and you can see when we start getting on the binders, there's a pretty good cloud of dust being kicked up behind it. We, I guess, have the record now for the shortest stop from wheels down to stop was 7,400 feet, and the braking profile was right on what they expected. It varied between 10 and 12 foot per second, almost all the way to touchdown. I mean, all the way to stop. Once we got stopped, we have to go through a few post-flight checklist items and shut down the APUs and the like, reconfigure the GPCs, and then it's time to get out and take a shower. Here we're coming down the steps. I almost pulled a Gerald Ford. We meet our boss, George Abbey, and everybody came through the flight in really great shape. As you can see, everybody's down, bouncing around, and sad the flight's over, but also happy to be back, and we were very pleased with the whole mission.